Hello everybody. I hope that the table discussions were valuable, provoking, and insightful. First, I want to say two things. Wow. And thanks to our host, Miranda Mulholland, to Dave Randall, speaking extemporaneously, no notes, wow. Lorraine Segato, Shoshona Kish, our board chair, Jennifer Sloan, thank you. I just wanted to point out that Dave has copies of his book out front, so they're there to be bought. And also, by the way, to the sorority. Yeah. Wow. I have to thank Corey Poole, who for Music Canada was the chief organizer and the brains behind this. So I'm Graham Henderson, and I'm about to give you an art history lesson. So why am I showing you this extraordinary painting after what we've listened to? This is political speech. This is a painting that was considered so seditious and so dangerous that for about 50 years after it had been painted, it was suppressed by the political superstructure and only appeared much later. The painting is called Liberty Leads the People, and it's by Eugene Delacroix. It hangs in the Louvre, and it was painted in 1830. This masterpiece was designed by Delacroix to celebrate and commemorate a momentous moment in French history. It was the overthrow of Charles X, a monarch who was threatening to undo all of the gains of the 1789 French Revolution. And for a few days in 1830, the people came together and rose up in what was called Les Tres Glorieuses, the 3 glorious days. Now, it's a monumental painting that toys with all of the traditions of French heroic art. The female figure here is Liberty, otherwise an allegorical figure, otherwise known as Marianne, remembered as Marianne, the very embodiment of the French Revolution of 1789. Now, she's at the barricades, and she is leading a cross-section of French society. The man here waving the saber, we know him to be a worker, a factory worker. The figure kneeling here is thought to be, by the way, Eugene Delacroix himself. He's a bourgeois. There are 2 street urchins, one down here and this boy here with the 2 pistols. This boy on the right came to be known as Gavroche, who you will remember from Les Miserables. And then in the back here with a cockaded hat is a student from the École Polytechnique. All of these people, and also 2 in the background, there's Notre Dame. She has the tricolor here, and there's a tiny little one up there. And if you're wondering why the French went crazy when Notre Dame burned, it was because it is the embodiment of liberty to their society. Now, Liberty herself is an allegorical figure, but she's also part historical. And she can, and I think this is my point, she can be actually thought of as a creation of the people. It's ordinary people, and this goes to Dave's point about the grassroots, it's ordinary people who make revolutions happen. Ordinary people who can affect change in the world, which was such a theme from Dave's book. When they come together, they can do that. And that's what the panel was talking about, too. In our case, it's music's power to change. But like so many modern creators, we heard a lot about things that stand in the way of political speech. And Delacroix himself had to be very, very careful to pick his battles because he had wealthy patrons. And if he painted the wrong things, then he might lose commissions. So even he moderated his speech. And as I mentioned, after the painting appeared originally, it was immediately purchased and then hidden away for years. People often rally around creators, right? This is So you could think of the allegorical figure of liberty, but remember that it is the people who give voice to liberty, but who gives voice to the people? And that's often the creators who give the context. And this is why Ursula K. Le Guin famously observed that dictators fear poets. Now, at first, that can seem ludicrous. How could that possibly be? Why would Donald Trump fear a poet? Well, in this case, you could imagine that liberty herself was conjured into life by the revolutionary poets and writers of the day. And in the early 1800s, if you wanted to effect change in society, you became a poet like Wordsworth, or a poet like Byron, or a poet like Shelley. More recently, more art's for art's sake, Keats. But more recently, people who have sought to change the world have been musicians, and that's what we've been talking about. But Shelley actually can help us understand another facet of Le Guin's remark, because Shelley himself is famous for having shrewdly observed, and I'm paraphrasing here, that poets are the legislators of the world. Now, this is a comment that has been confused and misunderstood, because he doesn't mean like lawmakers. He's thinking of it in a 19th century sense of the term legislator. He means a representative of the people. He meant to say that poets, creators in general, were representatives of the people, that they spoke for the people, that they imagined alternative futures for the people, and aspired to change the world for the better. It is the poet and the painter and the playwright who call liberty to the barricades and who inspire people, all of these people here, to make possible change in our world. If I could have the next slide. This man is Paul Foote. He's another man who wanted to change the world, and arguably he did. He was the greatest crusading journalist of his era. David and I were chatting about him last night, and he was also Shelley's great modern champion. Why did this man, this crusading journalist, a Marxist, a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, why did he think Shelley mattered today? Well, here's what he said. Of all the things about Shelley that really inspired people in the 160 years since his death, the thing that matters above all is his enthusiasm for the idea that the world can be changed. It shapes all his poetry. And when you come to read Ode to the West Wind, where he writes about the pestilence-stricken multitudes and the leaves being blown by the wind, then you understood that he sees the leaves as multitudes of people stricken by a pestilence. You begin to see his ideas, his enthusiasm, and his love of life. He believed in life, and he really felt that life is what mattered, that life could and should be better than it is, could be better, should be better, could and should be changed. That was the thing he believed in most of all. And that's what inspired Foote and, frankly, me. So did Shelley do that? Did he change the world? Well, we heard earlier the words "for the many, not the few" were uttered. That was the slogan that Jeremy Corbyn rode to that famous near electoral victory, and it comes from Shelley in his poem The Mask of Anarchy. Now, that poem was written in 1819. There's a movie commemorating it, actually, not commemorating the poem, but commemorating the massacre that took place in Manchester, which Shelley wrote about. But that poem, 100 years later, inspired a young Jewish immigrant to the United States. As a young girl, she worked in the rag trade in New York City. And there was a terrible fire called the Triangle Factory Fire. And the women and children that were working in the factory had been locked in, and dozens, if not more, died. Coming out of that, there was a desire to organize. And the inspiration for that organization was Shelley's poem, The Mask of Anarchy, 100 years later. And there is a wonderful graphic novel which chronicles the way that poem got written and the effect that it had on Pauline Newman, because Pauline Newman went on to found one of the most powerful unions in the history of the United States labor movement, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, and it was because of a poet. So if that was all Shelley ever did in his entire life, if we discounted his influence on Marx, on Engels, on Gandhi, on Paul Foote and others, I'd say he did a pretty good job. So that's what poets can do. This is the gift that musicians can give us. They believe that things can and should be changed, and that's why they're deserving of our respect and our support. Thank you. And we're wrapped. And that's it. Oh, one last thing. There is another person who I would like to thank, and it's Rodrigo Bravo. If you could just stand up for a second, Rodrigo. Rodrigo is an artist, and Rodrigo produced this brilliant piece of art for us, which is our poster. He's also been commissioned by us to chronicle in visual images what we've seen and heard today, and will produce a graphic novel. As I said to some of my staff, we're getting out of the music business and into the graphic novel business, and we're riding Rodrigo all the way. Thank you. Yeah. Political speech.